Good morning. It's truly a pleasure to have you here today in this meeting. Now, as Lucia was saying, we are going to focus here on reproductive medicine in breeding and dairy herds. It's a very important topic. You must have seen that there's a logic behind our presentations. These days and in the future, we're going to deal with topics like nutrition, integrated systems, genetics, markets also, we've just had a talk about that, and also very important, for us to cover all these axes is, well, reproductive medicine in breeding and dairy herds. We know that in Argentina, I'm sure, well, we're going to hear about this. We are in debt in terms of our global figures. There's a long way ahead and to learn about this topic. So I'm going to now pass the floor to Germán Cantón. Germán is at the Specialized Diagnostic Service at INTA Balcarce. He did his PhD in Scotland, correct me if I'm wrong. And currently, you're also the coordinator of the lab network for diagnosis at INTA Balcarce. Miguel Mejía is a rural physician. That's how he likes to introduce himself. Over 40 years of experience in advising farmers and leading vet working teams. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor to Germán. Remember to ask your questions as they come up through the WhatsApp number. We're going to have a space at the end for questions and answers. All right. There it is. Okay, thank you again. Thank you, Juan, for the invitation to participate in this panel. It's a pleasure also to be here with Miguel. We've known one another for many years. We've collaborated in different works, sharing the daily situations at the field. And our experience at Balcarce has to do with our service at Balcarce, which is what I'm going to talk about now. But it's a legacy project, as many times is the case from my master's. People that have been in Balcarce for many years. And this has allowed us for more than 50 years now to generate and accumulate information about sanitation problems in the production system, particularly in the province of Buenos Aires because of the logistics. But now, as Juan was saying, as I coordinate the INTA's lab network, I also accumulate information from Salta, Mercedes Corrientes, Bariloche, where we try to work as a network to have a more generic overview of the situation in the country in terms of sanitation. When we start the presentation, the idea is to give you some context about why we want to produce more meat. Particularly, mixed integrated systems are a challenge for those that come from traditional meat that was only beef in natural pastures, producing calves. The mixed production systems challenge in a way and expose a system that traditionally was quite extensive with lower loads, with different forage resources. So now we are starting to see new situations in terms of reproductive losses and also management situations like mineral deficiencies, and those that are underdiagnosed sometimes. So we start thinking about a viral or infectious problem as the cause for the reproductive loss, when in fact those are problems that are the result of mismanagement or nutritional mismanagement. To start, I always show this slide that is the estimate by the FAO from now onwards, comparing 2010 with 2050. There, there is a higher demand globally in terms of meat and milk. So our production system, as you see there, should be able to meet that demand. Besides the domestic market, we should be able to meet this demand in terms of high quality products for human consumption. This is not very clear, but what we mention in this graph is what they say in Australia, for instance, as meat production systems. When we compare ourselves with other countries, which we usually do in Argentina to see how they do it in other parts of the world, we try to compare against countries with similar systems. So this is from Australia. Pasture extensive systems in more subtropical conditions, more similar to the northeast or the northwest of Argentina, not so much the province of Buenos Aires in the center. And they said that a realistic target for breeding herds would be 100 cows leading to 80 calves at weaning. So that was a realistic objective. Depending on the intensification of the system and the geographic area, this might vary. In very good years, this could reach 90% of weaning, always starting from the 100 cows that come in. And in unfavorable conditions, these numbers can go down to 60 or 70% or even worse. And historically, that is the reality in Argentina. We are always in that 65, 69%. We rarely go over 70%. This means that every 10 cows we have in Argentina at a country level, of course, there are regional variations. There are regions where we are closer to 70 or above 70, and in other regions they're closer to 50. So at a country level, that is the statistics. Out of 10 cows that we have in Argentina, we are producing per year 6 calves, or 6 point something. This has an impact at the level of production, of course. Farmers would like to have those missing calves, but this has an impact, and that is that they are starting to demand, and that is environmental impact, because out of those 4 cows that are not productive, they're increasing the carbon footprint of the meat I'm producing in the system. So in the future, if I continue with a 65% of weaning and Uruguay has 70%, possibly the markets will go to Uruguay for purchasing, because the carbon footprint of the meat produced in Uruguay is better. It's difficult for farmers to understand this, but this is something that will be a barrier in the future, a para-tariff barrier. And the other thing is animal welfare. They are not having calves because they are not having a good time. And, you know, if the ear is complicated, the cow does not get pregnant. That's another indicator of animal welfare or well-being, and that's another reality, and we have to start considering that. In dairy herds, this is a different situation. The reproductive efficiency in general, there's not much information, not in breeding, perhaps a little more in dairy farms, but about gestation loss rates. This is from a colleague, a veterinarian that works a lot in dairy farms in Argentina, in the central part of Argentina. And out of the surveys he has done, he speaks of gestation loss rates in dairy farms of around 15 to 25%. And to a large extent, those losses happen in the first third of the gestation. So this is what normally happens, the reproductive efficiency in the dairy farms and how this affects milk production. And sometimes we don't have information about when those reproductive losses happen. In many farms, they don't do the manual test, so they don't have the service when then they realize they have a 60% of the calves of the cows they have in service. So starting to wonder why I don't have those 30 or 40 calves that I'm missing. If you don't know if the cow got pregnant, it's very difficult. So first we should try to characterize when I'm having that reduction. If the cow got pregnant,
muy temprano si lo hacemos más tarde, porque
if we do it later, because we start mixing situations, because it's not the same to have a cow that was not pregnant that a cow that had an abortion. The causes are normally totally different. Or perhaps we can then have problems at delivery, calf death. So if you start to, for the delivery to finish, to see why you're losing calves, then it's too late. And this comes from local information from the province of Buenos Aires. Here I'm mixing pears and apples because this is not the same source of information. But basically that information comes from different data. Blue shows the percentage of pregnancies in those years in specific farms in the Salado Basin. You see 2019, 2020, until last year. On average, 86% of pregnancies were achieved in those farms at the Cuenca del Salado. And in red, you can see the percentages of vaccination of the calves. That indicates possibly what percentage of calves we are weaning in those farms. And we have that gap, as you see there. First, 13% of cows that were not pregnant in the first place of all the cows we have in the basin, and then 8 point almost 5% of cows that were pregnant and then do not deliver. And this is to try and characterize the gap that we have in these cattle raising systems. Why I say it's important to know when it happens, because it's not the same. I always show this to start thinking about this. Causes of early reproductive losses or infertility. First cause is nutrition. If you work at the Salado Basin, you know many complicated years of cows don't get pregnant. Venereal diseases, that is the first thing we blame. But first we should start with nutrition. You don't know what the cow was like in the previous year. Those vets that do the palpation, I tell them, go and see how the cattle is doing, so that this is not a surprise then when you do the palpation. About the heat, we are given more relevance to this. In January, we are with the services and we're starting to see failures there, or the combination. The cow doesn't get pregnant in the first year of service because it was too slim and you want it to get pregnant in January, but then you have a thermal stress that is very important. For some reason at the dairy farms, the services are interrupted in summer, and we're starting to see the impact of that. And then, if the problem is abortions, then we go more firmly to infectious diseases, bacteria, viruses, protozoas that may cause the losses. But when we talk about this, I always follow the school of thinking of infectious diseases, but I like to open the stage and think that reproductive losses are not always infectious. There are many environmental, nutritional, hormonal issues, toxic, ambient temperature that can result in reproductive losses. Starting with the simplest, if I'm going to put the bulls in October 1st and then the cow is like this, I'm not going to be able to ask too much from those bulls. So traditional farmers recognize this and are aware of this, but it's like they always prefer to have a new virus or bacteria to explain the failure. About heat, as I mentioned, to be brief, of course, this is variable. These are different seasons. 2011-12, 12-13, 13-14, November, December, January, February. If you had a year like the past season and the cow came complicated from the spring and you wanted it to get pregnant in November, it didn't happen, and you wanted to get pregnant in December and January, and you have this thermal stress, as you see there, probably that year the palpation will not be successful. And in general, moving to the losses, further on and the causes of abortion between the palpation and the delivery, we see 1,500 fetuses that were analyzed. Actually, this is 94, 2014, 2025. Most of them are infectious, but we have almost 30% of fetuses. Then we have evidence that there was another problem there. These are the infectious causes. I'm not going to give you the details because we could speak about each one at length: bacterial, viral, infections, protozoos. Most of the cases we see is the cow that is registered at NPT, that is non-calf cow, but you never knew when the calf was lost, if it was aborted, if it died at birth. So it's very difficult in those cases to do a diagnosis because you got there too late, unfortunately. So for final considerations, first record the time of the losses, knowing when it happened, if it's a cow that was not pregnant, if I'm having early mortality, if at the palpation I detect an abortion, or if the problem is the abortion itself, or in around the delivery, as we have the subclinical problems and the subclinical diseases. Applying a sanitary plan doesn't mean you're not going to have issues. It's another tool. It's also important for the vet, knowing that the vaccines are not going to reduce the issue by 100%, but it will reduce the impact of these reproductive diseases. Trying to do diagnosis why the cow doesn't have a calf, but always knowing that the efficiency of the diagnosis is quite low in those cases. Alerting the staff at the field how to act, what they should see to realize early if there was an abortion, or simple things like, well, like those and how to approach them. Unfortunately, there's no immediate solution. If you're having abortions, that's the problem, to do a diagnosis and see what decision I make in the next service, what new vaccine I should apply, what management I should apply. As you see there, the diagnosis is not simple because of the times. The cow has an abortion today but was infected 4 months ago, for instance. So finding antibodies is difficult. Or there are diseases like osteoporosis. The cow was born with that disease. So the diagnosis is difficult to know the cause. And this is, for us to blame the labs. We have to improve diagnosis techniques to be more efficient in diagnosis, particularly. That was it. Now I will pass the floor to Miguel.
Bueno, buen día.
Good morning. After Germán's excellent remarks, I can say that all the things that he is referring to are things that we need to do beforehand, all the prevention. However, now I am going to refer to, just a sec, I cannot see the screen without glasses. I am going to talk about what we need to do once we have all of those issues under control with a good sanitary plan. And I'm going to talk about what I call the economy of the calf and why we should get the cows pregnant the way in which we are referring to. And I'm going to say how we can get them pregnant the right way. So the first thing that I always say is that reproduction shall be seen as business. In dairy farming, it's obvious because without that, we won't have milk. And if they do not get pregnant soon, then I won't be having any production peaks. So in dairy farming, we know that reproduction is a business. Still, there are dairy farms stopping their services in Argentina because of heat, or maybe because the staff is away on holiday and they are not making money those days because they are delaying those services, and we should talk about that. So we're going to try and talk about this. And I always say that farmers doing this need to know what are the issues affecting their business, how they play in the business, talking about money, and what are the tools available to correct that. So I'm going to discuss that now. And we need to stop thinking about reproduction as getting pregnant, getting the cow pregnant, or let's do this or let's do that. We should think of this as business. How I am going to be facing the reproductive year, and what is the profitability that I am expecting from it. So, something that has happened to me, I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world, and everywhere I visited, they would tell me the profitability of calves depends on the percentage of pregnancy. 60% first on this, then 30% the weight of the calves, the quality of those pregnancies, and only 10% depends on the cost of production. So this is the first thing. We are so used to saying, no, I cannot spend money in this. Well, no, I cannot do it if there's no return. However, I have to do it because I need to increase pregnancy rates or the weight of the calves, because that will have a lot of return in profitability. And yeah, people tell me, yeah, but that's what they tell you abroad. So, Julián Saavedra from Crea Soben did this work together with his team, and they measured the gross margin sensitivity to pregnancy and to the weight of the calves. They are showing average values, and they show how much 10% of variation in pregnancy or in the weight of the calves would affect profitability. And there you can see in orange that pregnancy is really what affects profitability. And if they have 10% less of pregnancy compared to what they have, they would end up without any gross margin whatsoever. However, if they have 10% less of the weight of calves, they will not be without the gross margin. So this clearly shows that I need to get the cows pregnant. This is what I need to bet on, and then see how I do it. So this is the why we need to get them pregnant. And we have more data. This is a very interesting piece of work, Christian Wurte's thesis. And what they did was the following. In the same dairy herd, they had, these were cows eating the same, right? So they had cows alone with the bull, cows that were synchronized with hormones and then were left with the bull, and then some others that were receiving an IATF treatment, and then they were sent to the bull. So this last case were calves with 28 kilos heavier than the other calves, and those who received the hormonal treatment were 20 kilos heavier than the others. And this is the same that we see in every paper. When I do this sort of treatment, I have 10 kilos per genetic and 10 kilos because I am getting them pregnant early. So these show the quality of the pregnancy. Getting them pregnant earlier gives me 20 kilos of calf per calf. So since this was a poor year, they were having low pregnancy rates. So this is telling me only about those calves of the cows that got pregnant. However, if I want to talk about the cows that were not pregnant, what is it that we find? The average weight of the calves per available cow, I could say that there were 15 points less of pregnancy in the cows that were alone with the bull. And look at the difference. This is the average weight of the cows. So look at this. We have a difference end-to-end of 69 kilos, because here we have pregnancy here too. So look at the impact of not getting them pregnant. And the second large impact is to getting them pregnant too late. And this is related to what Germán said. If the cow was too slim and did not get pregnant the first month, will it get pregnant and in the last month? Then I lost almost 20 to 30 kilos per calf. So we are using this because of the insemination. But with the natural system, the same happens, and this is why I need to get the cows pregnant. Oh, wait. I don't know what's happening here. Oh, yeah, okay. So there are those that I have discussed before were their direct effects, the kilos. But there are other effects, indirect effects, that are very important as well. And we know that getting them pregnant early will define the structure of the herd, especially with the heifers. This works by Mr. Pordomingo will follow what was said in the 80s. If I'm going to get them pregnant very early, if the heifers are going to be getting pregnant very early, the composition of my herd will be better. And here we see that there is 75% of correlation with longevity. Those cows that were pregnant very early when they were heifers are going to last longer in the dairy herd. And here we see that the offspring of the cows that are born early are much more efficient throughout their entire lives. It's going to take them 2 or 3 less months in getting to that same weight, and this has a huge impact on the weight of them. So getting them pregnant early is something that we should be obsessed about. So with that being said, let's talk about how to get them pregnant. And the first thing that I say is we cannot work with these cows that are not getting pregnant naturally sometimes. And I need for my cow to go through its cycle, because we are talking about the bulls. And Germán referred to what we are asking from bulls. And I just want the bull to do their job, which is to get the cow pregnant. But it cannot do it if I'm not giving them the chance of encounter a cow that can be really put into service. And look what happens with the Salado Basin at the beginning of the service and the cycle of the cows. We see that the average cycle is 29%, and there are millions of pieces of data around this, the data of Germán Dominguez, of Uruguay, Alejo Menchaca, telling us that our cows, when we put them into service, we have less than half of them going through their cycle. So thinking of the previous slide, if they're not going through their cycle, then we won't be able to get them pregnant, or at least get them pregnant early. So what could be the pregnancy that I have with a natural service of 21 days? In an ideal situation, with cows delivering in body condition 6 in the scale from 1 to 9, very big cows, I am going to be having, if I'm lucky, 70% of the cycle, right? And then we know that the bull is not going to get the pregnant so easily. Their conception is 70%. So if the bull is servicing 100 cows, only 70 will get pregnant. So if I have 100 cows with a 70% of them going through their cycle, and if they're being served by the bull, then how many of them will get pregnant? 49% in 21 days. 7 by 7 equals 49. So I'm seeing a lot of people saying the treatment FTIA is complicated because it's not good, but you know what? The natural service will do the same in 29 days, and it's much worse. And this matches the number where they say, oh yeah, in natural service, the best is you have 70% in the first month, 20% then, and 10% after that. This is 70% during the first one. I have 50% in the first 21 days, one cycle, and then I have 20% more by half of the next cycle. And that's the top. That is like the biological limit of the natural service. So if 50% is going to be my biological limit in 21 days, and I have technology allowing me to do so on the first day, I cannot not use it when we saw the information that we saw of all the kilos that we are getting if we get them pregnant early. And one more thing, how much time do we have to get them pregnant? Because people say my service lasts 3 months, but if I want 1 calf per cow per year, I have 365 days. If not, that cow is going to be delayed, and that will cost 1 kilo per day. And look at this, the year has 365 years, and I have gestation of 280 days, and I have 30 days of time that the uterus needs to recover. And we are not talking about the cycle here. So how many days left do I have to get them pregnant? 55 days. 55 days if I avoid delays, right? So look at this. They are not cycling. I have to have them there for 55 days. So what does this mean? This is the result. If they are not cycling, none. There are no chances for them to be served. The chance of a cow to get pregnant is 1.22 because they have 2.5 cycles in 55 days. Now, cycles of 70%, and conception is 70%. So the cow will have 1.22. So if I add the treatment, the FTAI treatment at the beginning of the service, almost doubling the cow's chances of getting pregnant throughout the time that they are exposed. And this is the very important thing about this technique. And then the other thing, I told you that the cow will not be able to get pregnant without the cycle. However, with insemination, we can get them pregnant. And this work by Alejo Menchaca shows that we have some cows that are cycling and some other that are not cycling. Those with the corpus luteum are getting pregnant, right? And we see the difference here with the corpus luteum and without it. And the FTAI is allowing me to get those cows without cycle to get them pregnant. So if I can inseminate them, I will get them pregnant with these numbers, which are excellent. Therefore, there's one more thing that I would like to tell you about. They can tell me that these cows are not getting pregnant, and I'm going to come here to show you up close. This is a farm where they did this test. We have the different situations of the different cows, and we have them that were in deep estrus, and we see them how they got pregnant. And those that were in estrus, the superficial one, we have 15% body, 11% tail. And those that were in profound aestrum with the insemination were pregnant with higher percentages. And this was not just that they got pregnant because of the insemination. So this was also the activation with hormones that made the bull get them pregnant. So here, in the head pregnancy of those cycling cows, 53% was through the insemination, and the rest with the bull. Then in the superficial was 42%, and then in the deep one was 63% through the insemination and 38% through the bull. So having the hormonal treatment made these cows to be pregnant by the bull during the first month, when they were not pregnant through the insemination. So when we all do the FTAI AI, we know, no, without this, I will not have any return. And this depends on how I'm assessing this. So in this case, pay attention to this. Pregnancy through the insemination, we have these numbers that you can see in this bar graph, right? But can you tell me that that 29% is not profitable? Because without the hormonal treatment, the number would have been 0. And look at this. In this breeding herd, we have those cows that were in deep anestrus that were able to get pregnant in San Luis during the year of the drought with only 40-something millimeters a year. So we need to get to know these tools, to apply them. And I always say that FTAI is the best tool that we have these days to make money. And I always finish my presentations with this slide. The body condition in delivery is going to define the cycle of the cows. And if I have to measure this body condition, I would do it at delivery, because the time between the first heat and delivery is going to depend on the weight of the cow, how fat it is. So if I'm able to have a cow delivering being fat, I will have more cyclicity. And with this, I will have more head pregnancy. And with this, I will have heavier calves. And with this, I can wean them earlier. And this will allow me to improve the body condition of the cow. So this is a virtuous cycle. So what do I do here? Well, I can have a key to enter this cycle, which is FTAI. And many people tell me, no, this is a year of drought. I won't do this insemination treatment. Quite the contrary. I will do it at the worst times and at the worst situations. Why? Because even though the numbers with this insemination is not very good, the other scenario is much worse. The return of investment is going to be much better, even though I might have an FTAI poor number. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Bueno, gracias Miguel, gracias Germán. Vamos a ver, no sé si pudieron ir haciendo algunas preguntas.
I don't know if there's any questions so far. You have the WhatsApp number there with the QR code, or we can do it just orally here. Raise your hands and we'll get you the mic. Let's go ahead with the questions. In 15 months heifers, is it possible to use FTAI to achieve more head pregnancy, but then having a lot of reabsorption in the first days, and then, but generally speaking, it's lower with FTAI than with natural service? There's a slide that didn't show. I don't know why. There it is. Yes. We are seeing more losses in the FTAI pregnancies than in natural service pregnancies, and particularly in 15-month heifers. We've been measuring that. We have some farms where the 15-month heifer is not sent to the bull, so it's exclusively FTAI, and we are finding between 8 to 10% of losses. We do a palpation at 32 days, and then we reevaluate it with the end of service palpation with the whole cow, and we're having 8 to 10% losses. As we don't consider it normal, but it's like a common finding. There are cases that I'm aware of where there has been up to 16% of losses, and we still do not know why. I have my idea. In Argentina, we do not work at the bovine. We have it with calves at delivery, and I think it's the disease. And when you go abroad, everybody speaks permanently about that disease and what it implies in terms of immunosuppression and losses. So today we are working in 3 or 4 herds where, or farms where the 15-month herds at second service are already without PI. So I'm waiting for the data to prove that. We have a farm in Las Flores where that has a lot, it improved a lot when we eliminated the PIs in the herds. But in Argentina, we don't pay attention to this disease, but it's the global disease. Yeah, there are studies of 0% prevalence. Many herds are zero positive, so it implies that it's a virus that is permanently around, with prevalence sometimes above 50% of the animals infected. In the cases of abortion, apart from the early losses, it's not that high, but perhaps, and we should assume a responsibility, the diagnosis is more complex, more difficult to detect. Perhaps in the future with molecular techniques it will be easier. But I'm sure it's one of those diseases that are clearly underdiagnosed and based on its impact on the reproductive. Yeah, when it's when I say PI, it means persistently infected. Actually, it's PI. It's an animal that is born infected, that it was infected in the uterus, and it releases viruses to the environment permanently in large amounts. 1 to 3% of the calves in the herds are in that condition, and it's a source of virus that is huge and permanent. So as long as you have persistently infected animals in your herd, that disease is always going to be there. I have an interesting anecdote. In England, they eliminated BVD, and then they forbid vaccination because they are free of it. Then a farmer got BVD again out of those that were not vaccinated in the free zone area, and he realized because 20% of the animals were positive to TB, and it was a TB-free zone. Of course, there was TB in wild animals. And so having BVD again produced such an imbalance in the immunosuppression that TB appeared again. This is for you to see the importance of BVD compared to all the other diseases. Good morning. I wanted to ask you if you have any experience and opinion about after FTAI, instead of going to bulls again, doing a dual FTAI. Yes, we have a lot of experience. We do it a lot in heifers, in dairy farms. We do it systematically with heifers. We do the resynchronization, and today we have technologies like echodoppler that allows you to deposit the semen again on day 21st after the first insemination. I'm sure that I would do echodoppler and double or triple synchro without thinking about it. In breeding herds, we've been discussing it a lot with those that do the imaging. The second round and the movement and the stress, particularly you have to move the whole herd and half of it is already infected with or has already gone through the FTAI. So I think it's more profitable first one round than two. But there you need to be clear about many things. It will all depend on the year. If I have fat cows in the herd, I do the FTEI and then the second round. If I have very slim cows, I can do the FTA and then the second round with a palpation on day 30 of the anestrum to see if they were not, why they were not pregnant. That can happen in tough years, as in the past years where the rains came very late in spring. In that anestrum palpation, which is absolutely normal and routine in the north. Here it's like we are surprised, but in the north, you palpate the cow 2 or 3 times during the service to see the cycling and to make decisions about the cow that is not cycling. And we do it routinely here. And that is something that works. Technology is there. It's wonderful. We have to decide based on what each company would like to do. Good. I think, do you have time for one more question? Yes? Can we have one more? I wanted to ask Dr. Mejía. At once, they said that after FTAI, you had to wait for 10 or 15 days for the bulls to come in. Now, bulls come in one day after FTAI. It all depends on what you want to do. If you are a breeding farm and you want to differentiate, perhaps you should wait for 10 days so that in the 30-day palpation you can differentiate for 100% certainty. In a breeding herd, I'm sending bulls the day after. And in cases like this, here you see 84% positive in the first 25 days. This was a more crazy idea. That is, we inseminated with the bull in already, but we don't have more time. So you can, send me an email. Well, I'm sure there are many more questions that have not been answered, which is a good thing. We have no more time, and I would just like to thank you, Miguel, Germán, for your willingness, and thank you, all of you, for coming here, and thank you for your interest and your commitment to keep learning and improving Argentine cattle raising. So a round of applause for Miguel and Germán, and thank you.